They didn't fail because they got weaker. They failed because they got too good. Pause silence then, calmly. Blockbuster didn't collapse from Netflix. Kodak didn't die from digital cameras. Lehman didn't fall from the housing crash. They all fell from the same invisible force, one that activates the moment you believe you've won. This isn't about markets. It's not about strategy. It's about what success does to your brain and your organization's nervous system when no one's watching. Most leaders think failure comes from outside pressure. The truth, elite collapse is always self-inflicted, and it begins precisely when performance peaks. If you've ever trusted your track record more than your current reality, this is why you're already at risk. You do not go blind all at once. You go blind the moment you believe you can see perfectly. Picture this. A seasoned pilot flying through thick fog. Instruments sharp, hands steady. He has done this route 100 times. Then, suddenly, the altimeter drifts. A half degree off, but his brain filters it out. Not because he is careless. Because his nervous system has learned to trust memory more than measurement. That is not confidence. That is cognitive sedation. This is the clarity trap. The silent illusion that because you have decoded the past, you now own the future. Your brain stops treating uncertainty as data, starts treating it as noise to be deleted. Look at Nokia. In 2007, they held 49% of the global smartphone market. Their engineers had built touchscreens years before the iPhone. They even had app stores, but their leadership knew what phones were supposed to be: durable, long battery, voice-first devices. Anything else, a niche toy. They did not miss the future. They filtered it out because it did not match their mental model of success. And this is not arrogance, it is biology. When you win repeatedly, dopamine floods your prefrontal cortex, not just as reward, but as a prediction signal. Over time, your brain starts mistaking this worked before for this will always work. A 2021 MIT study using fMRI scans found that after 3 consecutive wins, subjects' brains showed a 37% drop in activity in regions responsible for detecting novel threats. Their perception literally narrowed, not by choice, by chemistry. Elite performers know this. That is why Ray Dalio insists on believability-weighted decision-making, forcing himself to assign less weight to his own opinions, precisely when he feels most certain. Why Jeff Bezos still asks, "What is the one thing we are wrong about?" in every major meeting. Not as ritual, as neural hygiene. Because clarity without curiosity is not vision. T is vertigo disguised as control. And here is the chilling part. Your team senses this shift before you do. They stop challenging you, not out of fear, but because they assume you already know. They interpret your calm as omniscience. But it is not just your brain lying to you. Yours, your entire organization rewarding the lie. Because, while you are basking in clarity, your people have already stopped bringing you the one thing that could save you. Inconvenient truth. Alignment feels like strength, but in silence, it is just ego wearing a suit. Imagine your leadership team as a symphony orchestra. Everyone plays the same score in perfect harmony. Beautiful, reassuring, until someone hears a dissonant note, a shift in the market, a flaw in the model, but says nothing. Not out of cowardice, out of respect, because interrupting the music feels like betrayal. That is the consensus illusion, a dangerous belief that agreement equals accuracy. In reality, unanimous decisions are often the quietest form of collective delusion. Look at Boeing S-737 MAX crisis. Engineers knew the MCAS system was unstable. Test pilots flagged erratic behavior. But in meetings, concerns were softened into suggestions. Warnings became footnotes. Why? Because the culture had equated dissent with disloyalty, and loyalty with silence. The plane did not crash because of a faulty sensor. It crashed because truth could not survive the journey from the hangar to the boardroom. And this is not cultural failure, it is neural. When groups prioritize cohesion over cognitive friction, the brain's interior insula, region that signals discomfort when something feels off, actually deactivates. A 2019 study in neurons showed that participants in high-consensus environments stopped registering ethical red flags after just 12 minutes of group discussion. Their bodies literally stopped feeling unease. Silence was not chosen. It was neurologically enforced. But elite organizations do not wait for heroes to speak up. They design systems where disagreement is automatic. At Bridgewater Associates, every meeting is recorded, and employees are rated on how directly they challenge ideas, even their bosses. At Amazon, the disagree and commit principle is not philosophy. TAC is protocol. They do not value harmony. They value signal integrity, because once your culture stops punishing silence, it starts punishing truth, and truth does not leave all at once. It leaks through closed doors, skipped meetings, quiet resignations, until the only people left are those who have already stopped believing in reality. But here is what knowing tells you. The real danger is not that your team agrees. It is that they have forgotten what disagreement even sounds like. Your strategy did not fail. Your identity did. Picture a fortress built not of stone, but of words. We are the rebels. We put customers first. We do not do ads. These are not slogans. See our self-portraits, carved into the company's bones. And once engraved, they become impossible to revise without feeling like betrayal. That is identity lock-in. When your mission stops being a compass and becomes a cage, you no longer ask, what works? You ask, what fits who we are? Even as the world burns outside, BlackBerry is the textbook case. For years, they prided themselves on physical keyboards, enterprise security, and email-first design. When touchscreens rose, it did not just resist. It demoralized resistance. Real professionals need keys, executives said. Not because data supported it, but because touch felt like surrendering their soul. They did not lose the smartphone war. They lost the ability to imagine themselves in it differently. And this is not stubbornness. It is memory. Neuroscience reveals that when people or organizations tie decisions to identity, the brain activates the same regions used for autobiographical recall. The medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate. A 2020 study in PNAS found that when subjects were asked to abandon a belief tied to self-concept, their brains responded as if experiencing physical pain, literally activating the anterior cingulate cortex. The same zone lit up during injury. Changing strategy felt like self-erasure. But elite leaders do not own identities, just release them. Satya Nadella did not declare Microsoft a cloud company because it was true. He declared it to make it true. He treated Microsoft's identity like software, versioned, updated, replaceable. No nostalgia, no sacred cows, just ruthless alignment with the future demanded, not what the past deserved. Because once you fuse what we do with who we are, you stop evolving, start defending. And the deepest trap is not in your strategy, it is in your memory. You do not just remember your origin story, you worship it. And while you are polishing that myth, reality moves on without you. You do not remember how you won, you remember how you wish you would won. Imagine your company's origin story as a photograph. At first, it is grainy, taken in chaos, under bad lighting, half the team missing. But over time, you crop out the panic, airbrush the near bankruptcy, remove the investor who screamed, "This is a scam." In your third pitch meeting, What is left is not history. It is propaganda dressed as legacy. This is the memory distortion loop. The quiet rewriting of your past into a clean arc of genius and grit, erasing the luck, the stumbles, the sheer randomness that actually got you here. And with every retelling, your brain believes it more. Take Airbnb. Today, their story is sleek. 3 guys rented air mattresses during a conference. Inspiring, simple, what they rarely mention. That 40 years, they sold cereal boxes, Obama Os, and Capenis Cacanes just to pay rent. That investors called them crazy. That Brian Chesky slept on floors while begging for meetings. The sanitized version feels empowering. It is dangerous. Because if you believe success came from pure vision, you will assume the next win requires the same formula. Not adaptation, not luck, just more of you. And this is not storytelling. It is neural self-deception. Psychologists call it retrospective bias, the tendency to reconstruct past events as more predictable than they were. A Harvard study tracking 150 startups found that within 18 months of a funding round, 73% of founders described their early struggles as part of the plan, even though internal emails showed panic, confusion, and constant pivots. Worse, source amnesia kicks in. You remember the outcome, but forget the uncertainty that surrounded it. Your brain deletes the noising with it, the humility. But elite organizations refuse nostalgia. At SpaceX, engineers keep a failure wall, photos of exploded rockets, melted nozzles, aborted launches, lace handwritten notes. This taught us sex, not as shame, as immune memory. Like antibodies for future arrogance. Because when you forget how fragile your rise really was, you start believing your fall is impossible. And when memory fails, metrics lie. You will point to your growth charts, your NPS scores, your retention curves, as if numbers alone could shield you from the chaos you have already forgotten. But data without historical honesty is just decoration on a tombstone. Your dashboard is not showing you the truth. It's showing you a funeral dressed as a celebration. Picture a cockpit glowing with lights, revenue up, engagement climbing, CAC down. Every needle in the green. The crew smiles. They have nailed it. But outside the window, unseen, the runway is crumbling. Not because the instruments are broken, because they were never designed to detect what is missing. That is the metric mirage. When KPIs stop diagnosing and start performing. When data becomes ritual, precise, polished, and utterly blind to the silent collapse happening just beyond the frame. Look at WeWork. In 2018, every internal metric screamed success. Occupancy rates, member growth, geographic expansion. Leadership celebrated. Community adjusted EBITDA, a metric they invented to make losses look like vision. But the real signal was not in the numbers. It was in the silence. Landlords demanding upfront rent, enterprise clients refusing long-term leases, employees whispering about unsustainable burn. None of it was tracked. None of it was measured. Because if it could not be graphed, it did not exist. And this is not mismanagement. It is cognitive overload. Neuroscience shows that under high data volume, the brain defaults to attentional tunneling, hyperfocusing on familiar inputs while filtering out ambiguous or unquantified signals. A 2020 study in cognition found that executives reviewing dashboards with more than 7 active metrics experienced a 41% drop in sensitivity to contextual anomalies, even when those anomalies predicted failure. Precision became the enemy of perception. But elite operators do not chase more data. They hunt for absence. Top hedge funds track silent metrics. Not what is happening, but what should be happening and is not. No new competitor mentions in earnings calls. That is a red flag. Customer support tickets dropping too fast. Could mean users have given up, not that satisfaction rose. They measure voids, because in complex systems, danger does not shout, it disappears. You can optimize every funnel, every cohort, every retention curve. But if you are not tracking what your metrics refuse to see, you are not steering, you are rehearsing. And even perfect data will not save you if your nervous system is already offline, because no dashboard can replace the quiet unease of a leader who still listens to silence, to friction, to the hum of something missing, and that hum. It is the only metric that matters when everything else looks fine. Calm is not always control. Sometimes, it is just numbness wearing a tailored suit. Imagine a lion in the wild, muscles coiled, ears twitching at every rustle, pupils dilated even in daylight. Now imagine that same lion in a zoo, fed on schedule, no predators, no surprises. Over time, its nervous system downshifts, not because it is wise, because it is safe. And safety, sustained long enough, becomes biological silence. That is arousal collapse. The slow erosion of your body's threat detection system under chronic success. Your heart rate stabilizes. Your cortisol drops. Your breathing deepens. To the outside world, you are centered. But inside, your brain has stopped scanning for danger. Not because there is none, but because it forgot how to feel it. Consider Intel in the early 2010, dominant in PCs, cache-rich, respected. Yet, as mobile chips surged, their leadership moved slowly, not out of ignorance, but because the urgency never felt real. No adrenaline spike, no gut twist, just spreadsheets and strategy decks. By the time they sensed the shift, ARM had already rewired the world. This is not complacency. It is neurochemistry. With prolonged stability, the brain reduces baseline, noradrenergic tone, neurochemical current that keeps you alert to subtle change. A 2023 study from the Max Planck Institute found that executives in high-success environments showed a 28% drop in locus coeruleus activity, the brain's alarm center, compared to peers in volatile markets. Even when shown identical threat scenarios, their bodies literally stopped sounding the alarm. Worse, they lost interoceptive sensitivity, the ability to read internal signals like unease, hesitation, or instinctive friction. They could analyze data flawlessly, but could not feel the quiet wrongness beneath it. Elite performers know this. That is why Naval Ravikant schedules discomfort blocks, deliberate exposure to unfamiliar problems with no clear solution. Why top special forces units rotate leaders into ambiguous, low-stakes field exercises every quarter, not to train tactics, but to recalibrate their nervous systems. They do not avoid stress, they inoculate with it. Because vigilance is not a mindset, it is a physiology. And without it, you will not see the cliff. You will just wonder why the ground disappeared. So the question is not how to avoid failure, but how to stay awake while winning. Because the moment success feels peaceful is the moment your biology stops protecting you. And the most dangerous silence is not in the room, it is in your own pulse. Success does not blind you, it sedates you. Think back. The moment things started going too smoothly, that is when the signals began to fade. Not because they vanished, but because your nervous system stopped registering them. Your clarity became a cage. Your consensus, a chorus of echoes. Your identity, a monument you could not alter. Your memory, a myth. Your metrics, a mirror that only showed what you wanted to see. And your calm, a slow withdrawal from reality itself. This is not failure by accident. It is collapse by design, woven into the very fabric of winning. But awareness changes everything. The moment you feel perfectly in control, that is your cue to look deeper, to seek dissonance, to protect not your success, but your sensitivity, Because the next threat will not come with sirens. It will arrive in silence. And only those who have trained themselves to hear it will survive. If you sense something familiar in this pattern, if you have ever trusted your track record more than your present unease, you are not alone. You are part of a quiet group, leaders who know that real power is not in never falling, but in staying awake long enough to see the fall before it happens. And if you are ready for what comes next, how the top 0.1% do not just avoid these traps, but use hidden mental models to turn uncertainty into asymmetric advantage, then the next insight is already waiting. It is called the hidden mental models behind billion-dollar decisions, and it begins where most stop, after the win.